And then, verse 20, Noah built an altar to the Lord. And he took every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the Lord. Now, so the Bible records that Noah built two things. He built an ark for the saving of his family, and he built an altar to worship God. Those are the only two things Noah ever built that we know of. An ark and an altar. And when Noah stepped off the ark onto dry ground, the first thing on his mind was worshiping God and honoring God. And this really shows us Noah's heart for God and the preeminence of God in Noah's life, the priority of God in Noah's life. You know, in Colossians chapter 1, verse 18, it says, "In all things Jesus Christ should have preeminence." In other words, Christ should be first in everything we do. And God was first in Noah's life. He was Noah's priority. And it says here that Noah offered burnt offerings to the Lord. Now, burnt offerings, they represent total commitment or total consecration to the Lord. And so the first thing that Noah did after the flood was he recommitted himself to God. He recommitted himself to God through this act of worship. Now, Noah was already committed to God. It's not that he's like backslidden and recommitting his life to God. He's already pretty committed. I mean, he built an ark. He's done this whole thing. He's been on this boat. He's obeyed the Lord. But he recommitted himself voluntarily, just out of the desire of his heart for God. Now, according to the law, which comes later, but the burnt offering was a voluntary offering. It wasn't required. It wasn't commanded. It wasn't like a sin offering where you've sinned and now you've got to make an offering for your sin. The burnt offering is completely voluntary. It's a voluntary act of worship. And that's what Noah does here. This is a voluntary act of worship on Noah's part. Now watch what it says here. So Noah gets off the boat. He wants to worship the Lord. He recommits himself, reconsecrates himself to the Lord voluntarily. It's not required, but this is just his heart for God. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma, it says. God smells that meat grilling over a fire. You know what that's like. You've walked around your neighborhood on a Saturday and you can smell someone grilling. And what do you say? Oh, someone's grilling. Right? Wonder what that is. It's a sweet smelling aroma to us. And Noah's offering here, these burnt offerings, they were a sweet smelling aroma to God. It was a soothing aroma, it says. Noah's offering smelled so good to God because it was a voluntary offering. Because Noah did it just out of his own heart. And it blessed God deeply. It blesses God. It blesses God. When we just choose to worship Him voluntarily. Not because we have to or commanded to or we feel like we're obligated to, but just kind of on our own because we want to, just out of the gratitude of our heart, or the gratitude that we feel towards the Lord, and we worship Him, and that blesses God. That ministers to Him. So much so, watch what the Lord says here. In verse 21, the Lord smells a soothing aroma of Noah's offering. Look what the Lord says. Then the Lord said in His heart. The Lord says in His heart, after smelling Noah's offering, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. Although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. This is so remarkable here. God smells that burnt offering from Noah, that voluntary act of worship. And after smelling the soothing aroma of Noah's offering, God says in his heart, you know what, I'm never going to judge the earth again with a flood. Although man's heart was still evil, although man still deserved judgment, God smells the offering and God says, I'm going to withhold my judgment. In other words, God is impacted and affected by Noah's act of worship. In fact, instead of judging the earth again, he will bless the earth with seed time and harvest and cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night. In other words, seasons and cycles. These all speak of the grace and blessing of God on mankind. Even though man's heart is evil, God is still going to give him seed time and harvest and seasons and so on. God's still going to be faithful to provide these cycles by his grace. Noah's voluntary act of worship greatly impacted God's heart, so much so that God says, yes, mankind's heart is evil. Yes, mankind is full of corruption and wickedness. No, mankind has not changed at all, but I'm blessed. I'm blessed by Noah's worship. I'm blessed by Noah's worship, and so I'm not going to drown the world in a flood again. Instead, I'm going to bless mankind and be gracious to him. And you know what that's like. If you've had children, and your children can act really rotten, and then they just do something really kind, you know what? And you're just like, all right, I'm not going to kill you, In fact, come on, and I want to bless you. Why? Because man, it just blesses your heart as a parent to see them do something on their own, voluntarily, not because you're commanding them or forcing them or making them. Just on their own. And in response, you're so blessed by it that you want to bless them. And you withhold your judgment, so to speak. Even though they deserve it, even though there's evil in their heart. Right? And listen. We have evil in our heart. We sin. Every day we fall short. Yet when we choose to worship God just voluntarily on our own because we want to, or we recommit ourselves or reconsecrate ourselves to God, it ministers to Him. It ministers to Him. It ministers to our Father in heaven, so that He says, yeah, you're sinful. Yeah, you blew it. But I'm blessed. I'm blessed by your worship. I'm blessed that the desire of your heart is to honor me. I'm blessed that you want to consecrate yourself to me. Even though you're evil, even though you're sinful, even though you've got wickedness in your heart, it blesses me. And I want to bless you in return. And you know what? You can lie in your bed tonight and you can worship the Lord. And you can get up tomorrow morning and you can spend time with the Lord. Not because you have to, not because you're being guilted into it, but just voluntarily, I want to. I just want to set aside some time just to consecrate myself to the Lord. And yes, I'm sinful. Yes, I'm struggling. Yes, I'm falling short. Yes, I blew it yesterday. But I'm here meeting with the Lord, and the Lord's blessed by that. He knows you're a sinner. He knows how inconsistent you are. And yet when you choose in your heart that even though I'm falling short constantly, but I'm choosing to honor God and worship Him, blesses him. And he says, you know what? I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to punish you. Even though you're evil, even though you're falling short. Instead, I'm going to bless you because of your heart for me.